Imagine a world where the headlines are just screaming, "Barbarians at the city gates,"
Yeah.
right? And then there's this author, totally audacious, who decides, yeah, I'm going to dive right into that chaos.
Right.
He doesn't just, stand back and watch. He gets on a bike, rides with them, lives it, and eventually gets himself stomped.
Yeah, and that intense, immersive experience, that's really the heart of Hunter S. Thompson's book, Hell's Angels, A Strange and Terrible Saga. So today we're doing a deep dive into this really remarkable piece of writing. And it's not just about the motorcycles, is it? It's more about exploring that clash, that huge gap between the media sensationalism and a very complex and often kind of unsettling reality.
Oh, absolutely. And what a journey he documented. Our main source here is Thompson's own account. It's incredibly raw, very personal. It came out of spending, over a year in really close contact with the Hells Angels?
Yeah. Over a year. It was this unique, maybe even dangerous kind of journalism he was doing. The writer actually became part of the story. He put himself right on the line physically and mentally just to understand this subculture.
So our mission today really is to try and unpack some of those myths, maybe cut through the sensationalism that always surrounded the Angels back then. We want to get to the stark realities of this infamous outlaw motorcycle club, but specifically through Thompson's eyes.
Exactly. We'll look at how they were perceived, in 1960s America, how they actually lived day to day, and what they maybe represented to a society that was, frankly, going through some major changes itself. It's kind of a shortcut to understanding a really pivotal moment in cultural history, actually.
Okay, let's get into it then. Maybe we should start with just the visual impact. How the Angels looked, how they announced themselves before saying a single word.
The Outlaws emblem and the roar of the hog.
You definitely couldn't miss them. Their colors, right. That embroidered patch, the winged skull with the motorcycle helmet. And it always had MC for Motorcycle Club, and then the chapter name underneath, like San Bernardino or Oakland. Instantly recognizable.
Oh, yeah. But what really jumps out from Thompson's writing is what else they wore. Beyond that main patch, they deliberately used other symbols. Things like Luftwaffe insignia, German iron crosses, and Thompson's clear. They picked them purely for the shock value.
Yeah, it was like a deliberate poke in the eye to mainstream society, wasn't it?
Absolutely calculated. And their whole appearance fed into that. I mean, picture it. These guys with massive arms, often full beards, hair down to their shoulders, maybe a single earring, and their weapons. Sometimes just belts made from hollowed motorcycle drive chains. You could just unhook it and swing it.
Wow.
It wasn't just clothing. It was like this walking, roaring statement of defiance.
And the absolute center of that identity, the literal engine, was the motorcycle itself. It wasn't just a way to get around. Thompson describes it almost as a phallic locomotor symbol,
Right.
like an extension of one's body. He talks about this intense big bike mystique, these powerful, often really temperamental machines, almost always Harleys, usually customized. They were a challenge, a test of whether you could control them.
Yeah, and Thompson himself kind of got sucked in. He wrote, "Anybody who has ever owned one of the beasts will always be a little bit queer for them."
Huh. Yeah, that quote really sticks with you. It speaks to this incredibly deep, almost primal connection they had with the machines.
That connection is just crucial to understanding who they were. But it also brings up an interesting point Thompson observed. While they totally idealized these big American Harleys, Thompson noticed that actually lighter, maybe hotter bikes like British Triumphs or BSAs could often run circles around a stock Harley 74.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it suggests their fierce pride in the Harleys sometimes kind of overlooked the actual performance facts, a detail often conveniently ignored within the club itself.
So the statement the Harley made was maybe more important than how fast it actually went. That feels, very human, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Pride-trumping performance. Did Thompson get into how the Angels felt about that, or did they just, collectively ignore it?
He definitely implies it was sort of a necessary myth for them. Like, to question the Harley would be to question their whole identity,
Right.
And for these guys, riding wasn't just about speed anyway. It was about pushing limits. Thompson's descriptions are just visceral. He talks about screwing the throttle on to 100 miles an hour, reaching that point where fear becomes exhilaration. It was a dangerous game, though. He saw it. He experienced it himself. Lots of high side crashes.
The high side crash, exactly.
It's when the bike slides out in a curve, usually towards the high side, catches on something, and then violently flips over. Nasty stuff. Led to loads of broken bones, constant trips to the hospital. It was part of the life.
That idea of living right on the edge, where fear flips into exhilaration, It really comes across strongly in the book.
Yeah.
It wasn't just riding a bike. It felt more like constantly confronting mortality, maybe. A way to feel intensely alive. Sounds exhausting, though.
Definitely. And maybe that constant risk, that shared danger, is part of what held them together.
Inside the Angels' world, rules, rituals, and revelations.
Yeah, it's kind of striking how much structure there actually was inside this group of supposed individualists. Sonny Barger, the president of the Oakland chapter, he was very clear about it. He said, "To be an angel, you have to conform to the rules of our society, and the angels' rules are the toughest anywhere."
Wow. Tough rules.
And a key one, bylaw number 10, was all on one and one on all. Basically, when an angel punches a non-angel, all other angels will participate. No hesitation.
That's intense. A serious commitment to backing each other up, but pretty terrifying if you're on the outside looking in. And Thompson's real skill was taking us inside that world, introducing us to the guys who live by that code, like Terry the Tramp. Big guy, 6'2", 210 pounds, wild reputation, tall and ugly police record, as Thompson put it. But Terry insisted he had without a single felony conviction. Called himself a fuck-up, but said everything he did was just natural. His story really shows how media could just wreck their lives, too. He got fired from his job at General Motors after some article came out asking him about alleged gang rapes.
Yeah, the consequences were real and immediate. And then you had different types, like Tiny.
Yeah.
He was the sergeant at arms for the Oakland chapter. Huge guy, 6'6", 240 pounds. But get this, he also worked as a credit supervisor for a TV appliance store. Made decent money chasing down people who hadn't paid their bill.
A credit supervisor?
Seriously.
Seriously. And he was the one who famously attacked that Get Out of Vietnam protest in Berkeley.
Right, I remember reading about that. But even though the initial charges were serious, film footage later showed it differently, and it got reduced way down to just disorderly conduct. Makes you question those initial hyped-up reports,
It really does.
Yeah.
A credit supervisor by day, angel brawler by night. What a contrast. And then there was Magoo.
Yeah.
Thompson describes him as a teamster and a pill freak.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently started the riot in Porterville by beating up an old guy who threw beer on him. Thompson said he had a Cro-Magnon appearance, but also this weird dignity and his own strange moral code.
Yeah, like practicing shooting matchsticks with a .22 pistol. Just odd details.
And didn't he get set on fire once at a party? As a joke.
As a prank, yeah. Woke up to find himself literally on fire. It shows the kind of chaotic, sometimes brutal world they inhabited. These weren't simple villains. They were complex, deeply flawed people.
And definitely unpredictable.
And you can't forget Mother Miles. He was the president of the Sacramento chapter, well-respected, described as kind of motherly, actually, someone who took care of everybody.
Brotherly, that's unexpected.
Right. But he was killed in a crash. And his funeral, Thompson writes, was this big show of strength for the guys left behind. A bleak reminder that the tribe is smaller by one. But the striking detail, despite all their outlaw posturing, Miles was buried clean-shaven, wearing a suit. His colors were just displayed on a stand nearby.
Wow. So even in death, there was this kind of contradiction, a nod to convention behind the defiant image.
Exactly. It shows these private rituals and respects that often clashed with their public persona.
It's those glimpses of unexpected humanity that really make Thompson's account so powerful, I think. And besides the individual stories, he also painted a pretty stark picture of their internal society, especially when it came to women.
Yeah, very stark. There was a clear line drawn between old ladies and mamas. Old ladies were wives or steady girlfriends. They were considered spoken for. But mamas, as Thompson described them, were basically common property, available at any time in any way to any angel. It's a harsh reality.
Really harsh. And some rival gangs took that even further, didn't they?
They did. Thompson mentions the Satan slaves who actually branded their communal women with tattoos saying, "property of Satan slaves."
Oh my God.
Some angels apparently thought that was real class, but others, like Terry the Tramp, questioned it mostly because it was permanent. Shows even they had lines, or at least internal debates about where those lines were.
Property of Satan slaves tattoos. That's just chilling. It's such an extreme form of, well, ownership and defiance. Did Thompson give any sense of how the women felt about this whole system?
He mainly observed it from the male perspective, which is a limitation, of course, but he definitely conveyed the reality of their subordinate status within that world. It was part of the landscape, seemingly accepted by those who chose to be part of it, and it all fed into their idea of showing class, which often meant these extreme acts of defiance.
Right.
Thompson called the angels willfully stupid, but not without savoir-faire. Their initiation ritual, for instance, involved deliberately defiling the new member's jacket with dung and urine. He said this kind of exaggeration is the backbone of their style. It was all about rejecting society's norms in the most extreme way possible.
And connecting this back to their internal world, it's pretty fascinating how drugs affected them, specifically LSD.
Yeah, that was a surprising observation. Counter to the stereotype of them being constantly aggressive, Thompson found that on LSD, most of the angels became oddly peaceful.
Really? Peaceful?
Yeah. He felt the drug dissolved many of their conditioned reflexes, made them much easier to get along with, less aggressive, less suspicious, although it wasn't always calm. He mentions one incident where an angel on LSD tried to strangle his old lady. So, still unpredictable.
Still unpredictable, yeah. But it adds another layer, doesn't it? A more nuanced picture than the public probably ever imagined.
The media, the law, and the rising tide.
Okay, so shifting focus a bit to how the outside world reacted. Yeah. Thompson really zeroes in on the media's role in amplifying fear. He talks about this rape mania. His point wasn't just that it was sensationalism, but that it became this kind of self-feeding cycle. Media exaggeration fueled public panic, which then seemed to justify police crackdowns, often based on pretty flimsy evidence.
Right, like the Monterey case you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. The infamous Monterey rape accusations. Guys get arrested, bond is set pretty low, actually only $1,100 each. They end up in jail. But then, less than a month later, the charges against Terry, Marvin, Mother Miles, Crazy Cross, they're all dropped. Lack of evidence, unreliable witnesses.
But the story had already taken hold, right?
Totally. And despite the charges being dropped, major outlets like Time, the New York Times, they kept printing what Thompson called flagrant libels and just slothful, emotionally biased journalism.
Wow. So they were basically constructing a narrative that fit the fear, even when the facts didn't line up.
Pretty much. Thompson really highlighted this battle of narratives. He'd compare the media horror stories with, say, an eyewitness report from the mayor of Porterville, Bill Rogers. Rogers wrote this report called They Came, They Saw, They Did Not Conquer, which described events as much less chaotic than the police reports or news articles did. Those disparities in emphasis and context were huge in shaping how scared people got.
And all that media heat must have affected how the police dealt with them, too.
Oh, absolutely. It fed into law enforcement strategies. Police often tried to isolate the angels, like in Monterey or at Bass Lake. They used things like restraining orders, massive roadblocks. Thompson described a real balance of terror at Bass Lake between Sheriff Tiny Baxter and Sonny Barger. One wrong move, like the cops denying the angels access to beer, could have triggered a massive brawl, a king hell brawl, as he put it.
Just constantly on edge.
Constantly. And even Thompson himself got caught up in it. Just because he bought a motorcycle and hung around the angels, the police started harassing him. He racked up enough points to lose his driver's license in just 3 weeks, even though he wasn't technically an outlaw himself.
That really shows how easily you could be targeted just by association, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Now, it wasn't just the public and police grappling with the angels' image. They got pulled into politics, too, kind of reluctantly, it seems.
Yeah, reluctantly is a good word. Thompson described them as rigidly anti-communist, with this sort of retrograde patriotism, maybe similar to groups like the John Birch Society or even the KKK in some ways.
Okay.
But initially, he says, they didn't care much about specific political issues. Their growing notoriety, though, kind of forced their hand. I mean, Sonny Barger actually sent a telegram to President Johnson offering a crack group of trained guerrillas, spelled wrong, G-O-R-I-L-L-A-S, for duty in Vietnam.
No way. Guerrillas, that's incredible.
Incredible, right? And their fame led to other weird moments, like the poet Allen Ginsberg actually stepping in to try and stop the Angels from attacking anti-war protesters in Berkeley.
Allen Ginsberg, how did that happen?
Apparently, he went and talked to them, tried to appeal to them, talking about peace and finding common ground, contrasting the heat of war with being natural brothers in the counterculture. Yeah. And somehow, it worked. The Angels held this bizarre press conference and announced they wouldn't counter-demonstrate after all. They said their own patriotic concern might provoke us to violent acts, so they were staying away.
Wow. That's quite a turnaround. Shows a strange kind of public maneuvering, maybe.
Yeah, manipulation, influence, maybe just confusion. It was a really weird, tense moment.
So wrapping this all up, what was Thompson's final take on what the Angels represented?
Well, he didn't see them as just some romantic leftover from a bygone era. He saw them as something new, maybe ominous. He called them the first wave of a future that nothing in our history has prepared us to cope with.
Wow, that's a heavy statement.
It is. He pointed to their lack of education, combined with having the leisure to cultivate a powerful resentment. He saw them as prototypes for this broader rising tide of lawlessness, this growing lack of respect for law and order. He even mentions police sometimes being more worried about ordinary teenagers than the angels, because at least with the angels you kind of knew what you were dealing with.
Right. Predictable unpredictability, maybe.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Thompson felt the angels, as outlaws, were acting out the daydreams of millions of losers, people who maybe felt the same anger but didn't have the nerve or the means to defy the system so openly.
It's a really powerful, almost prophetic way to frame it, isn't it? He wasn't just writing about a biker gang. He was using them as a mirror to reflect these deeper shifts and anxieties in 1960s America.
Exactly. That's the core of the book's power, I think.
Okay, so just to recap, we've seen how Hunter S. Thompson went deep inside, peeling back those layers of media hype to show us this really complex subculture. They were fiercely individualistic in some ways, but also rigidly conformist within their own rules. Their whole identity seemed forged in chrome, grease, and just sheer defiance.
And we explored that huge gap between how the public saw them and their own internal world. Even how their leaders had to constantly navigate this tricky balance with the police, the media, everyone.
Right. And what Thompson's whole journey really shows us, maybe, isn't just the story of one motorcycle gang. It feels more like a reflection on our own societal anxieties and the incredible, sometimes distorting power the media holds.
Yeah, it definitely pushes you as a listener to look past the easy headlines and question your own assumptions about who we label as outlaws or rebels in any time period.
Absolutely. You know, the Hells Angels constantly lived on what Thompson called the edge, that risky place where rules don't quite apply and the consequences are always severe. For Thompson, and maybe for us too, that edge kind of becomes a metaphor for how we define reality itself, that place where, as he put it, fear becomes exhilaration. So our final thought for you today is this. What are the edges in your own life? They might not involve motorcycles and brawls, but where do you push boundaries? And what surprising truths might pop up when you dare to get close to them?